Thank you so much, Nicole, for joining us today on Malcontent News. I know our viewers are very interested to hear your opinions on a variety of issues facing them at the ballot booth, or in this case, at home, filling out their ballot.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
So obviously, you've lived in Seattle now for a while. You're lived here 25 years. You've attended both Seattle Central, University of Washington. You got your law degree at Seattle University. You're raising a family here. Why did you choose the Seattle City Attorney race versus any other to, seek election?
I chose the Seattle City Attorney race because I am an attorney and that's what I like to do. I don't know that I've definitely never considered running for any other office. I don't really think of myself as a politician. So I like the specificity of what the city attorney does. It's very, obviously like legal based, but also I was a public defender and I saw for the criminal division. In any case, I saw what the city attorney was doing for misdemeanors in the city, and I thought it was disturbing and that I could do a much better job on that.
One thing that a lot of your opponent supporters have mentioned to me is that they do believe that you want to eliminate the criminal division of the city attorney's office. Is that your goal, to end prosecution of all crime in the city of Seattle?
There's a couple things before we get to that. First, the city of Seattle only prosecutes misdemeanors, and misdemeanors are by definition the lowest level of crimes. So even though some misdemeanors have scary names like assault, it is the lowest. It's not that it doesn't matter, but it is the least serious assault that we're talking about. Most of the crimes that are in the city attorney's office are what they call civility crimes, things like trespassing. There's a lot of low level and petty theft. Ultimately, I would like to live in a city and a world where we don't have to have this system. Lots of policing, prosecution for petty crime, things of that nature. We don't live there right now. So while I think that there are some prosecutions that we don't need to be pursuing, there's just much, much, much better ways that are more efficient, cheaper, and will be more deterrent than prosecuting. There are some things, like especially when we're talking about repeat DUIs or domestic violence, where I think prosecution has to remain an option until we can build a system that is effectively preventing those things, and systems of accountability of dealing with those things and making sure that we can move forward from them. We don't have those yet though, but that is the goal of the office, is to, one, not keep spending all this money prosecuting petty crimes that we could deal with in a much easier way. So that I would like to stop doing that pretty immediately. And when I talk about that, I mean sleeping under an awning, jaywalking, stealing from Goodwill, things like that. There's just no point in spending the money on that. We could do it better, but there is some things that will have to remain for now. But, ideally, I would like to be preventing most of this stuff so we don't have to be dealing with things this way.
The Bias Crimes Unit of the Seattle Police Department has reported that there were 153 bias crimes based on race, ethnicity, or ancestry, 22 based on sexual orientation, and 13 based on gender or gender identity. Obviously, many more bias crimes go unreported. Do you believe this is a concern? And if so, how can the city attorney's office help to address this issue?
Well, first of all, I would say crimes based on those protected classes that you're talking about are felonies. They're not misdemeanors. So there is that block there of like, I can't really do anything about, if I was city attorney, I wouldn't be able to do anything about those things anyway, because they would be in the purview of the county prosecutor since they're felonies. But I do think that the more we do build community, really lessen desperation in our communities, I think those are the things that are going to result in less violent crime overall. Also, there's been lots of studies, or there's been in other cities like Boston and Baltimore, where they stopped pursuing a lot of low-level crimes. And what they saw was an overall drop in crime, even the more serious violent crime. So I think while I wouldn't be dealing with those directly, I think the idea of community building and building up other supports and services would drop crime overall. But yeah, I wouldn't have the authority to prosecute those if I was in the city attorney's office.
Now, the city, like most municipalities, of equal size, are facing an opioid crisis at the moment on its streets. We also see people high on stimulants walking around in our neighborhoods. If you favor ending the war on drugs, are you also giving up on addressing the problem?
I mean, I think the problem with the war on drugs is it's not addressing the problem. We're funneling billions of dollars into police and prisons over the war on drugs, but addiction is a medical issue. It's a healthcare issue. The war on drugs has been going for most of the time that I've been alive. And I think maybe all of it, but it's not worked. It's not an effective way of doing, like, we have more people addicted now to drugs than we did when the war on drugs started. So I would like to see some solutions to the problem, and locking people up and punishing people for it is not working. So we really need to look towards other models, which is like a health-based model, a community-based model where we foster a connection and healing and helping people work through trauma. But really, this is a medical problem. We need money and resources to deal with, but instead we've been spending billions on cops and prisons, and it hasn't worked. Ending the war on drugs is not about ignoring our problems. It's about facing what they actually are and what is actually going to work.
Now, likewise, we've seen an explosion of mental health cases in our courts, and in Seattle, we do have the mental health court, which is a voluntary program where defendants can seek deferred prosecution for crimes stemming from any type of mental illness. Would you support programs like this as a city attorney?
I don't think mental health court is really that effective. Personally, very few people actually get through mental health court. I think that if we're going to do diversionary programs where if someone's trying to get help and is volunteering to get help, I don't think we need to have a judge and a bunch of lawyers there to oversee that. Again, it's a healthcare problem, and we're spending all this money on lawyers. Like, lawyers are not qualified for these problems, and it would be so much less expensive to have a diversionary program that's a pre-prosecution program where when people are voluntary and they want to engage with these services, like, we don't have to file, we don't have to hold a charge over their head to get them to do that. We can provide those services. We can hook people up with those services without spending millions and millions on courts and lawyers for that.
Now, domestic violence remains a concern that affects households of all socioeconomic classes, all backgrounds and neighborhoods. However, we see poorer families that are stuck in a crisis situation due to a lack of financial resources and other support. What will you do as the city attorney to aid victims of domestic violence?
I mean, this is one of the most important questions, I think, because first, there's a lot of domestic violence that's not reported for a lot of reasons. For a lot of reasons, people don't feel comfortable going to the police, or that's not an option for them. Also, some of the behaviors that are in a pattern of abuse or a control for domestic violence aren't necessarily illegal. There's a whole pattern of, isolation, and not giving access to money or things like that have this whole that form this whole wheel of control around domestic violence. And so what we're seeing is a lot of people that just don't have access to any sort of system that can help them. And I think that's especially evident when we're talking about people that don't have financial circumstance, like where their financial circumstances aren't super easy to begin with. It's really hard for people to leave those situations when they don't have anywhere to go, when they don't, when they can't support themselves or their children for all kinds of reasons. And so I think if we're going to really look at being able to assist as many people as possible, I think the criminal legal system, especially in the misdemeanor system, is not always the best system to deal with those things, because we're really talking about one incident as opposed to the whole cycle of abuse. While there are times when prosecution might be the last resort or the only option or the best option, like, it needs to remain an option for now. But really, when we're talking about survivors, we need to be taking into account what they have been saying for years that they want, which is access to resources, housing, transportation, childcare. We don't need to spend so much money on putting someone temporarily in jail, especially for misdemeanors. Everyone's getting out of jail in less than a year. The maximum sentence is less than a year. So what are we doing to ensure survivors' safety after that? And I think that's what we really need to be focusing the resources of the office on, and really are, when we're talking about domestic violence and wanting to actually be of assistance in generating safety and healing for survivors, we need to be talking about what they actually want. And by and large, most of them don't want more incarceration.
Now, you advocate for defunding the Seattle Police Department, but obviously have no authority over the drafting or approving of the budget. Why then should voters consider this as a serious campaign proposal?
Defunding the police, right? It's something that I cannot do myself, but it is a framework for how to look at where we need to be going. So first, I think that there are some things that I'm not going to prosecute. I'm not going to prosecute consensual sex work at all. And so we have a vice squad that spends untold thousands of dollars on sting operations that if there's not going to be an outcome for them, we don't need to spend that money anymore. But there's also the idea behind defunding the police. I mean, defund the police is like the short slogan, but defunding the police is about reinvesting in community and building up community safety programs. So that's what I'm going to be looking to do, is like, whether, I mean, the criminal division, there is like, a few $1 million there that can be reinvested into the community to build up community safety and support programs. And that's what I would be looking to do, because yes, I cannot.
The Seattle Community Police Commission has stated that 4 years after its adoption, the accountability ordinance has yet to be fully implemented. They say that 32 of the most critical police disciplinary reforms have yet to be addressed. Do you support this view, and how will you address their concerns if elected?
There are certain people that have like more agency in that situation than others, but I think the most important thing that's coming up is there's going to be contract negotiations. The new police contract is going to be negotiated next year. And I think like when we're talking about the things that the Community Police Commission is asking for, yes, they've been asking for those things for years. And those were things that were bargained away during the last negotiations, and they need to be in the contract. And I think that we are in a different place as a city today than we were 4 years ago. And I think it's extremely important when having someone that's going to be serious about negotiating that contract and not giving in to everything that's been desired, because that's kind of what happened last time. There was a really big giveaway on a whole lot of things, and the Community Police Commission has been very vocal about what didn't get in there, as was Judge Robart, and so I think, yes, I take those things very seriously. I think that measures that don't expand the budget has already expanded so much. Measures that don't expand the budget and that can be very effective, are the most important things to be focusing on. So yeah, I 100% support efforts towards holding police accountable as we build up systems so we don't need them so much anymore.
Now, your campaign platform includes your support for the Green New Deal. Mm-hmm. How would the choice of city attorney help the city address the looming environmental crisis?
I think the city attorney is tasked with defending ordinances that the city council passes. And one of the most important things that they passed is progressive taxation. The Jumpstart tax, which is going to fund the Green New Deal. I think Pete Holmes' office has done a great job of defending that so far. But whatever progressive taxation that they can pass, it will be up to the city attorney to defend that as aggressively as possible. So that's one thing. The other thing is the city attorney directs all of the litigation for the city, whether defense or proactive. And so the city has the ability to go after fossil fuel companies that have knowingly created this climate crisis. And that's something that we can do. And I would be excited to do that, because as we move forward, I mean, the climate crisis is already here. We all went through the heat dome and the wildfires every summer now. There's already pieces of infrastructure that taxpayers are paying for just so we can survive. It shouldn't be taxpayers that are paying for those things. It should be the companies that knowingly cause the damage.
So what are your proposals to address the crisis of homelessness and the houseless population in Seattle?
I mean, I think the first thing that could be done is we could stop making people homeless by shoving them through the jail over petty crimes. I had a lot of clients as a public defender that became homeless because they could not pay bail. I think the other thing that like the city attorney can do is really work with the city council to repeal exclusionary zoning laws that prevent us from building affordable housing. It needs to be attacked from a lot of different sides. And I think the sweeps are really damaging. And I've talked to a lot of different community groups, and I've done mutual aid myself. I've been to some of the sweeps. I think there's an idea that sweeps are happening and people are just refusing services. And that's not really the case. A lot of time people aren't receiving offers for anything. And a lot of their things are just being thrown away. So they kind of have to start over getting basic survival supplies. So that's damaging and expensive. And it's already cost the city in litigation as well. There has been successful lawsuits over the sweeps. What we need to be doing is really focusing on what transitionary housing can we build. So whether that's tiny house villages, whether we have legalized encampments that are serviced by the city, those are options until we can get people into permanent housing. Because I really think this idea of just like shuffling people, congregate shelters we can't do right now. And you know what? They were never that great anyway. But really getting people into something transitionary and then moving them into some permanent affordable housing. Because also the issue is, you can offer someone a hotel voucher for 2 weeks, but then what's going to happen to them after that? You know what I mean? They're going to all their stuff is they can't take their stuff with them necessarily. They can't take everything with them. So their stuff's going to be gone. There's just a lot of different considerations. And I think we need to get serious about the problem, and the idea that we can jail our way out of it or sweep our way out of it is absurd.
I heard you say that the legal system is not broken, but working as designed. You go on to say that while working as a public defender, that you came to believe that even in liberal Seattle, that the system is so much worse than you imagined. Can you elaborate on that for our viewers?
I thought that I was prepared for what I was going to see before I became a public defender. And especially when I went to Seattle Municipal Court, it was such an eye-opening experience because it was just so much more tragic than I thought. I really did not think that people in Seattle were being prosecuted for stealing flip-flops from Goodwill or a deodorant from Target, but that's what I was seeing. And the reality was that Black people were there 5 times more often than white people in proportion to their population, and Indigenous people 6 times more. And to me, that was like, man, this is progressive Seattle. And we are prosecuting someone for flip-flops. Even if someone can pay bail, the process is the punishment, like coming back over and over and over again to court or being put on probation. That's just like, you have to keep showing up all the time, and how that really messed with people's jobs and people putting their lives back together, people with their kids. And there was just a lot of things that I saw in that court were really horrifying. I saw a single mother come to court one time with her child, and she was required to get a drug and alcohol evaluation. This was her 3rd court appearance. She finally had it done. She couldn't get it done before because she couldn't afford it. She finally had it done, and the judge was angry because it hadn't been done earlier and took her into custody, like in front of her child, like for doing the thing that she was supposed to do. It was just so cruel and unnecessary. And it was sadly not uncommon. The system was built to disappear the disabled, BIPOC, and the poor. And that's exactly what I saw happening at Seattle Municipal Court.
Finally, I want to give you an opportunity to tell the voters why they should vote for you.
I think voters should vote for me because I have the experience needed in order to turn the ship around and right the ship at where we really should be going in terms of the criminal system. I have worked inside of it. I have seen what happens. As a public defender, I got to know my clients and their families and their living situations. And I saw the destruction that it wreaked on communities. So I think that's one of the best reasons to vote for me would be that experience that I have. I also think that what people really want in Seattle is a more equitable city. And when we have policies and processes and litigation that focus on helping the most vulnerable, that's how we're going to get ourselves out of the crisis that we're in. We're seeing a huge poverty crisis of people being unsheltered. And part of that is not focusing on the people who are most vulnerable. And so really turning to focus on what can we do for people to become self-reliant, to be able to support themselves, to be able to address their own problems, and to get the help that they need to flourish in their lives. I think that's the thing that's going to really push us forward as a city and be the city that we really want. Because what I'm suggesting, I think sometimes is what people think is already happening, but it's not. Like I said, we can't prosecute our way out of poverty. We cannot jail our way into mental health, and we can't punish our way out of addiction. So we need to take some really common sense steps towards solving those problems. And that's what I'd like to do.
Thank you, Nicole Thomas-Kennedy, for joining us today. I think you really gave our viewers a big sense of where you are in a variety of issues. Again, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.